Honestly, I must say that I'm intrigued. I'm almost puzzled by this thing. It's very interesting. Yeah. You know, he's coming to obviously express solidarity with Israel, which is clear. But I'm kind of like thinking about what I detect as some kind of like nuanced American messages vis-a-vis the story of the war in Gaza. And I'll talk about it. I mean, it's further emphasized to me when I'm looking at the American message towards the Iranians and the Hezbollah, which is very decisive, and it's a one focal message. Don't. It's very clear that the American administration sent a very significant message to the Iran and Hezbollah, very significant. And basically the message is very, very clear. The message is you cannot really wrong about this message. The message to them is stay out of that, otherwise you are going to have problems with us, the United States of America. And this is very significant. It has a lot of impact. I think that so far, and I think I'm saying that cautiously, it seems like the Iranian regime is very seriously taking into consideration that threat, and that may impact the Iranian regime in the end to stay out of the war, not to involve Hezbollah. When I'm looking at the American messages vis-a-vis the story of Gaza, I detect three focal stories. One is a very clear statement of Biden himself, who said, you have to eliminate Hamas. Then there is another focal story, which is obviously the American hostages. And the third one is the story of the concern about humanitarian crisis. And when I look at that, and I'm looking at the nuanced discussion and sub-signals sent from the American administration, that puzzles me. Because since day one, there is an ongoing conversation about the Israeli upcoming massive ground operation in Gaza Strip. And all indicators basically signals that this is going to happen. I mean, Israel have, gathered huge army. It's clear that they are on a final phase of preparations, and so on and so on. So the logic thing is to say, okay, the United States of America gives Israel a green light to carry out what Israeli government say they want to do, and this is to eliminate Hamas military capacities. But into that come these sub-nuanced American messages about, as I said, the issue of the hostages and the issue of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza Strip. And I wonder and I'm relating that to the visit of Biden. I don't think that Biden here only just to express solidarity. I think there is another reason. There is some other more delicate discussion that is supposed to take place apparently between Biden and the Israeli leadership vis-a-vis the upcoming scenario in Gaza Strip. Now, it's very complex because in the Israeli public opinion, in the world, there is already, I would say, emotionally, mentally preparing for a massive Israeli ground operation. Obviously, in the Israeli public opinion, I would say there is an anticipation for something like that. And as I said before, the American administration clearly gives an open, green light to eliminate Hamas military capacities. But then I'm trying to understand or to see whether there is going to be some sort of like a different scenario. What do I mean by the different scenario? I think that there is going to be a military Israeli massive operation, and it's going to be gradual, and it's going to be coordinated in eye contact with the two other major focal points of the United States, meaning the issue of the hostages and the issue of the humanitarian crisis. And I think that the logic beyond that would be to basically present Hamas with some sort of like semi-deal, if I could call it this way. The semi-deal would be maybe something like that. If you want to remain somehow standing on your feet somehow, Hamas meaning, if you want to stay standing on your feet somehow, this is the deal. You are going to release all the hostages immediately, no conditions. That includes the bodies of 2 Israeli soldiers that Hamas keep for a couple of years, and also 2 other Israeli citizens that are held in Gaza Strip for the last couple of years. And there will be no conditions. That's the deal. It's kind of like semi-deal in the sense that it's basically going to have some logic beyond it. The logic beyond it would be, and this is something I think that we have to take into consideration thinking about it. Why is it so significant if it's going to happen? Meaning, and can it going to happen? In a minute I will say what I think. I think it can happen, and I will explain why is it so significant. Why that is so significant. Why that could be a very significant achievement for Israel and the United States. Hamas, one of Hamas' major branding cards is the whole issue of I, Hamas, I will liberate Palestinian prisoners. I will kidnap Israeli soldiers. I will kidnap Israeli citizens, and I will use them as a pawn to release Palestinian prisoners. This is Hamas, one of the major marketing cards of Hamas to the Palestinians. This was and is one of the most significant cards that gave Hamas popularity among the Palestinian people. In a scenario where Hamas is dropping this card in return for nothing other than just standing on his feet, this is a major nail in Hamas' political coffin. Because people in Gaza and the Arab world who already are criticizing Hamas for this destruction and havoc that he has inflicted in Gaza Strip, particularly after this barbaric attack, people will turn to Hamas and say, let us understand, you attacked Israel, you butchered babies, you raped women, you killed people, you burned, you brought havoc on Gaza Strip and destruction and death. And in the end of the day, you are giving back all the hostages, including the one that you were keeping as a bargaining chip, in return for just standing on your feet. So you can understand the amount of anger and disappointment and frustration that will be in the Palestinian arena, and it will be forward and focused on Hamas. Now, the second part is the question, can it happen? Will Hamas basically go down on his knees and says, okay, take them all back, no condition? The answer for that, in my opinion, is yes. And that has to do with the story with Iran and Hezbollah. The American message to Iran, the very strong message of Biden administration to Iran and Hezbollah, has an enormous impact. And the Mullah regime in Tehran actually, since day one of this war, basically find itself in a big dilemma. Because clearly Israel is determined to eliminate Hamas military power, to end Hamas rule in Gaza Strip. If this is going to happen, and America gives light green for that, this is a massive blow to the Iranian regime, because then they are losing a very significant card, strategic card. Because their ability to keep on as a puppeteer operating Hamas and Islamic Jihad to fuel the flames in Gaza Strip was serving very well the Iranian interests, because this is their interest. They want the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to continue and to escalate. So if they are losing Hamas rule in Gaza Strip, this is a bad news for the Mullah regime. So now they have to decide what are they going to do. They are going to accept the downfall of their base in Gaza Strip, which is a bad news for the Mullah regime, or they are going to send Hezbollah into the war trying to save Hamas and Islamic Jihad, which probably will not achieve that point. Even if Hezbollah is going to join the war, that will not save Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and more than that. It's very likely that if Hezbollah is moving into the war, the United States of America is going to join the war, and the Iranian then will sustain very significant losses in Hezbollah, in Lebanon, in Syria, and other places. So right now, if I'm putting myself in the shoes of the Iranian regime and I'm looking at the situation, I'm saying to myself, okay, I'm about to lose a very significant card, Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza Strip. I don't want to jeopardize my other assets because the United States of America means business this time. What am I going to do? And I think that the Mullah regime will basically say to Hamas, look, we need you to stay somehow standing on your feet, somehow. You will be shaking, you'll be whatever, but somehow standing on your feet. If your way out of that is to release the hostages with no condition, then release the hostages. And so that's the reason why I'm thinking that it can be a viable scenario. Now, if that is happening, meaning if the scenario that we are going to see is that there is an Israeli widening operation against Hamas in Gaza Strip and Islamic Jihad. That includes ground operation, aerial, naval operation, and others. Obviously, there is one major aspect in that whole scenario which has to do with the Israeli public opinion, because, as I said before, Israeli public opinion, there is an anticipation to eliminate Hamas this time after what he has done in Israel and to Israelis. So it's a many moving parts situation, and I would follow that very closely. But I would say that we can result in a situation where, if Hamas is going to be severely beaten, maybe not going to be eliminated totally, but if he's going to be severely beaten, if he's going to be brought down on his knees and to give up all the hostages with no return, he's going to be crucified in the Arab world and the Muslim world for what he has done and the disastrous outcome of what he has done. By the way, people in the Arab world, the Muslim world, are saying to Hamas, you already inflicted the second disaster on the Palestinians. They are referring to the first one, which is known as the Nakba from 1948. The sceneries of hundreds of thousands of Gazans fleeing from one side to Gaza to the other because of what Hamas did. This is something that fuels a lot of anger in the Arab and the Muslim world. And then there is another significant thing that also could be a massive blow to Hamas, and that is the story of one of the things that Hamas was marketing to the Arab and the Muslim world was this whole story of what is called in Arabic Wihdat al-Sahat, which means unifying the arenas. And the story beyond that, what Hamas was marketing to the Arab world, was that when there will be a war with Israel, Hezbollah and the Iranian will join Hamas and they will stand shoulder to shoulder. This is not happening now, and it may not happen. So that will increase the anger in the Arab world and the fury on Hamas and Islamic Jihad.
You can share with us.
Yeah, there are some interesting insights. Obviously, there are those in the Arab media who praise Hamas and glorify Hamas. These are Hamas supporters and others, but this is kind of like, this is not surprising. I think what's interesting to talk about is the other voices in the Muslim and the Arab world who harshly criticize Hamas, and they are bringing a couple of interesting points. One very significant point is that, Muslims and Arabs saying to Hamas, you are a disgrace to Islam. What you did is unforgivable. This is not Islam. This is atrocities. This is not Islam. So there is a genuine anger and a shame in parts of the Muslim and the Arab world. Others are even taking that to a place where they say, but what you have done, you basically eliminated not only babies and women, you eliminated the Palestinian cause. And other people saying to Hamas, you inflicted the second disaster on the Palestinian people. When they say that they refer to the first disaster in 1948, which is known in the Arab terminology as Nakba. And all that is piling on top of an increasing criticism and anger on Hamas in the Arab and the Muslim world since Hamas took over Gaza Strip in 2007, because many of the people in the Arab and the Muslim world, including Palestinians in Gaza, are saying to Hamas, look, you dragged Gaza Strip to disaster in the service of the Iranian regime. So again, I mean, the strategic defeat of Hamas is not necessarily only through the elimination of its military capacity. There is another significant part of this strategic defeat, and this is the political death or the political defeat of Hamas. And all these components that I mentioned, meaning if Hamas is going to be brought down on its knees and give up this card of hostages, release all of them, including the bodies of the Israeli soldiers and the other 2 Israeli citizens that are kept in Gaza Strip for the last couple of years, for no return. He will release them unconditionally. If that is happening, if Hezbollah and Iran are not going to intervene in the war, which probably seems to be the case, the anger and fury in the Arab world and Hamas and the Muslim world and Hamas obviously is going to mount. The feeling of loathing Hamas for what he has done in the Muslim and the Arab world. All those things together, and there is a good possibility that they will occur, each and one of those issues is a nail in Hamas' political coffin. And the finally one would be when it will be clearly revealed even to Hamas supporters, that the whole story of we will eliminate Israel through violence, and when the time comes, Hezbollah in Iran will stand with us and we will join shoulders, when it will be clear that it didn't happen, that will be, I would say, almost the last nail in Hamas' political coffin, with all the ramifications that comes along with that. So I think that, again, the ultimate scenario is eliminating Hamas' military capacities, eliminating Hamas' ability to continue to rule Gaza Strip, and basically nailing those nails that I mentioned in Hamas' political coffin. Maybe this whole scenario will materialize. Maybe some of that scenario will materialize. I'm just trying to indicate what I think may be different scenarios when we are trying to look ahead what's going to happen. I think that again, I think that currently, when I look at the whole picture, there is a significant opportunity for a positive strategic shift that will serve positively Israel's interest. Palestinians who are interested in solution and not to continue this bloody path forever and ever, and also will serve positively the strategic interest of the United States in the region. It's important how we play the cards. It's important what's the messages we send and how we back those messages. It's important to be standing as a very clear one front, and to set goals or demands or objectives that have to be fulfilled. They have to be fulfilled. I think that in all scenarios what we'll see is an Israeli massive operation. But I think that operation will be tuned also to two other elements. It will basically in eye contact in three focal arenas: eliminating Hamas military power and basically neutralizing him as a relevant factor, dealing with the issue of the hostages and the issue of the humanitarian crisis. And here there must be a same language of Israel and the United States of America. There is a very similar language. It must be the same language. Now maybe the need to come with a same language, not only similar language, maybe the ramifications of that will impact the feature of the Israeli military move in Gaza Strip, meaning it may result in a situation where the Israeli move will be a gradual process, not necessarily this all-out massive shock and awe, but it will be something gradual that basically is going parallel with a very clear objective. It may result in a situation where the Israeli war machine will stop. And maybe many Israelis will feel, in a way, disappointment or frustrated. But then, if it's going to be stopped because Hamas has complied with the demands with no conditions, A to Z, then we can look at that, we should look at it as a very significant strategic achievement because of the reasons that I mentioned before. Following the very powerful speech of President Biden, the first speech he made after the horrific attack of Hamas, and he was talking about sheer evil, and he had this amazing, powerful, and inspiring speech. He said many things in this speech, but there was one thing that he said that I was really captured my attention. And it was one word that he said. He was addressing Hezbollah in the Iranian, and he said, don't, meaning stay out. And he means business. He's serious about it because he was backing that statement with military deployment of military power on the ground. And this is a very significant moment because, I've been covering this region for many, many years, and one of the things that, I was writing about it in my latest book that was published in 22, and I was talking about the declining of the United States, declining influence and image of the United States in the region. And I explained that one of the reasons of that was this inability of the United States of America to project power. And the manifestation of that inability was in the fact that the United States find itself time and time again mumbling and jumbling and doing all this kind of rhetoric, belly dancing, sending signal messages at the same time, and something very not cohesive, something very not clear, something very not decisive. And now this is an interesting shift. It's interesting because President Biden basically shift the paradigm. He said one word. He said, don't. And he backed it with power on the ground, on the sea, in the air. And so, I'm thinking about it as a concluding thought to our conversation. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking to myself, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt, American president, who back then said, speak softly and carry a big stick. And I think that I can say about what Biden administration, what President Biden did in the context of the story of Iran and Hezbollah potential involvement in the war is very interesting, because Biden basically, what he did was basically saying, carry a big stick and say one word. Don't. This is projection of power. This is how you send a very clear messages to your enemies. And I think that this is one of the things I think that is kind of like, this whole thing is a pivotal moment in many, many ways, this whole story of the war. I think this is one of these moments as well, because it's assuming again that the American clear message to Iran and Hezbollah deters them. This is a paradigm shift. This is a paradigm shift that could rehabilitate the United States' declining image, that could rehabilitate the United States' image as a power, as the biggest superpower on this planet that can project power without even using its power. So this is a very significant, I would say this is a very significant point in the context of the story of the Middle East.